it's not up right now.
Okay, let's see.
All right, that's okay because I'm outside now. Hey, you guys, thank you for joining the FAFSA presentation that Ms. Carmichael will be giving you all tonight. This is going to be some very important information for you all on completing your FAFSA for this school year. Please note that this is a graduation requirement and your deadline to complete your FAFSA for Mentorship Academy is December 1st. So if you have any questions after the presentation, please feel free to ask those questions. I can either answer them or Ms. Carmichael can answer them.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and get my presentation pulled up. And then as a courtesy, if you don't mind leaving your Zoom video off and your volume muted, that would be great. We won't distract each other. Now, as I move through the presentation, you can use your Zoom chat box to leave me any comments that you might have, and we'll address those afterwards. But for tonight, I want to start a conversation about the student financial aid process. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, we'll all have a better understanding of what's going on. As Ms. London Moore mentioned, the Louisiana Department of Education has, oops, I think somebody still has their audio on. The Louisiana Department of Education has asked that the class of 2021 complete the free application for federal student aid as a requirement for graduation. And this simply ensures that your money is ready and waiting for you when you begin college in the fall. Now, because college can be expensive, you need to be aware of and start thinking about the costs of pursuing a post-secondary education. And these costs include equipment, books and supplies, personal expenses, room and board, and tuition and fees. Now, the good news is that there are plenty of opportunities to find financial aid from the federal government, your state government, the college and career school you plan to attend, and then nonprofit and private organizations. Every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in federal student aid. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to see if I can mute a couple of. All right. As I mentioned, the federal government offers more than $120 billion in federal student aid. And that includes the federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Afghan and Iraq Service Grant, Federal Work Study, and then direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. Now, the grants are a form of financial aid that does not have to be repaid, so you always want to accept any grant monies that you're offered. These include the Pell Grant, and this is for undergraduates with financial need, the FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need, service grants for students of military parents who died defending our country following 9/11, and then the TEACH grants for students pursuing a teaching career. Federal Work Study provides part-time jobs to help you pay for your college expenses. So when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested in Federal Work Study, you're going to be considered for this program. Now, um, these jobs are offered to you if you select yes on the FAFSA, telling them that you are interested in being offered these jobs. You are not obligated in any way to accept them, but one thing that they're really great about is they serve as a positive show on your resume once you graduate, so you can already begin your professional resume. When you do receive your financial aid offer and you see loans offered, it's important to note which loans should be accepted first. Now, the subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is charged on this type of loan until you graduate or cease to attend. There's an unsubsidized loan as well, and this loan is still a lower interest rate loan, but you need to know that you're going to be responsible for the interest on these loans while you're in school, and that can add up. So you see that there is a difference between the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. You always want to accept the subsidized portion first, and you can remember this by telling yourself that the U in unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest on that loan. Now, if you are offered loans, you always want to accept the federal student loans first if you need them, because payments aren't due until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed and at a lower rate, and you do not need a credit check for most federal student loans. On the other hand, the private loans should be accepted on an as needed basis because most of these require that payments be made while you're still in school. The interest rate might be variable and it's often quite a bit higher, and they almost always require a cosigner. And that means you're going to a parent or someone else and you're asking them to become part of this loan. And if you cannot repay it, they are going to be responsible. So always try to exhaust your federal student loans first. So you can see that almost everyone is eligible for some type of federal student aid. And all student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA. Now, you probably already know that it launched on October 1st, and it does so every year. So you must complete a FAFSA for every academic year you plan to be in college. Student financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So get to the head of the line and get your FAFSA completed as soon as possible. You'll want to pay close attention to your deadlines. Your colleges will have FAFSA deadlines. The TOPS scholarship requires a FAFSA deadline, and then federal student aid has a deadline as well. And I did understand that your counselor has a December, I believe it was December 1st deadline for you to complete your FAFSA. Students and parents should be gathering all the documents they need to complete the FAFSA. And if you have all these documents in front of you when you begin, the process should take no longer than 30 minutes. You want to make sure that you have the student and parents' social security cards, student and parents' 2019 federal income tax returns, if you filed, your W-2s, because there could be information listed on this form that's not reflected on your tax return. And then your bank statements and records of investments, because you're going to be asked to provide those balances as of the date you submit your FAFSA. You'll begin by creating a Federal Student Aid ID or an FSA ID, and this is going to allow the students and the parents to identify themselves electronically. The FSA ID is going to be created by you by using a unique username and password. The website that you need to go to is fsaid.ed.gov. And remember, the student and one parent need to create an FSAID. Now, only use your personal information. Don't share information. Don't use mom or dad's email address or social security or um, mobile phone number in your FSAID students. Be sure you're using only your personal info. And this is a good time to mention that you need to be using your personal email address. Don't use a school email address because that could be disabled once you graduate, and federal student aid will not have any way of getting in touch with you. Your FSAID is legally binding. It's your official electronic signature. So be sure you're recording it and keeping it in a very safe place. Now, if you don't have access to a computer, you can download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile phone or a mobile device that has internet access. But if you prefer, you can use the desktop version at fafsa.gov. You want to begin the FAFSA by logging in with the student's FSAID because the FAFSA is the student's application for federal student aid. Mom and Dad, your FSAID will be used to transfer your tax info from the IRS into the FAFSA if you choose, and then again to sign the student's FAFSA. The class of 2021 should complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA because that's the academic year that you're applying for financial aid. Now, there are 8 sections in the FAFSA that need to be completed before submitting, and those include the student demographic section, where you'll be asked to provide the student's social security number, name, date of birth, email address, physical address, residency status, and your gender. The school selection section, where you'll report your name of your high school, the colleges that you would like your FAFSA data to be sent to, and housing plans on each of those campuses. The dependency status section, where you'll be asked to consider 10 questions to determine whether you're a dependent or independent student. And we'll talk more about those questions in a few minutes. Then you'll report the number of dependents living in your household and your parents' education. And some parents question why they're being asked to provide their education level on the FAFSA. But it's important to know that there is additional financial aid on most campuses for first-generation college students. So be sure you're reporting that accurately. The parent demographic section will ask the parents to provide their social security numbers, their names, their marital status, and their email addresses. Then the parent and student financials will ask for information about your working wages from 2019 and any federal benefits that you receive. And this is where you're going to report your savings and investment balances. Then it's time to sign and submit your FAFSA. And once you do, you'll receive confirmation that it was submitted. Now, as you move through the FAFSA, if you have questions about a question, you can always look over to the right-hand side of the question and you'll see a question mark inside of a dark blue box. Check on that question mark for a more detailed description of what they expect for you to enter into that field. If you have other questions, there are hyperlinks provided. You can request an online FAFSA chat while you're in the form itself. You can call Federal Student Aid, or you can call me on Leela's FAFSA completion helpline, and I'll be happy to work with you individually. But for this session, I'm going to cover only the most commonly asked FAFSA questions. Now, if you have a question as we move through and I don't address it, please drop it in the chat box and I'll be sure and answer it at the end of the presentation. Or if you want to speak to me individually, I'm going to pop my email address and the FAFSA helpline up again later at the end of the presentation, and you can call me. The citizenship requirement is often asked about. A student must be a citizen or eligible non-citizen to complete a FAFSA, but his parents don't have to be. If a student is eligible to complete a FAFSA and his parents are not citizens, they will use zeros in lieu of a social security number. Then the student will go ahead and submit their FAFSA. Young men between the ages of 18 and 26 must be registered with Selective Service to receive federal student aid benefits. So if you haven't already registered with Selective Service or you haven't turned 18, you can say yes within the FAFSA that you want to be registered with Selective Service, and you will be registered the day that you turn 18. Now, this is optional for young men, but if you do need federal student aid to help pay for your college expenses, you do need to be registered. Only the colleges that you list on your FAFSA are going to consider you for student financial aid. So be sure that you are adding all of the schools you're considering, even if you haven't yet completed your admissions applications, and you can add up to 10 at a time. If you're planning to apply to more than 10 colleges, there are instructions here in this section to help you do that. Now, to determine whether you're a dependent or an independent student for FAFSA purposes, you're going to be asked to consider these 10 questions, and I'll quickly read over them. Will you be 24 or older by January 1st of the year for which you're applying for aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? And remember, these are questions they're asking of the student. Will you be working on a graduate degree? Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So if you're going to boot camp or basic training, this is considered training, and you still are considered a dependent student. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a ward or dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor, or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? Are you an unaccompanied youth who is homeless, or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Now, if you can answer yes to just one of these 10 questions and provide a legal document supporting your claim, then you're considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes, and you will not be required to provide parental information. But if you can't answer one of these 10 questions, then you are considered a dependent student and you need your parents' input. Now, for FAFSA purposes, unfortunately, if you are filing your own taxes or you live alone and you support yourself, but you cannot answer one of those 10 questions, you still are considered a dependent student. Now, the financial aid office can make some special arrangements for you, so contact them if you're in that situation. One of the most commonly asked questions is, who do I report as my parents on the FAFSA? So just think of it like this. The parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be reported on your FAFSA. Now, if you've lived with both of your biological parents, that's easy. You're just going to list both of them. But if the parent you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months is separated, divorced, or was never married, then you will list that parent only on your FAFSA, unless that parent is now remarried, and then you'll report that parent and your step parent. In other words, federal student aid wants to know the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the past 12 months. If you are identified as a dependent student, but your parents refuse to provide information on your FAFSA, you can go ahead and submit your FAFSA by stating, "I'm unable to provide parental information." But please contact your college financial aid office to discuss your situation, because if you do not call them and let them know that you have a special little situation going on, they're only going to offer you student loans. And you want to make sure that you are considered for the Pell money. To expedite the processing of your federal student aid, please attempt to use the Internal Revenue Data Retrieval tool. This is going to make things go a lot quicker. And if you have problems using it, give me a call on the helpline or call Federal Student Aid. If you don't use this tool and you manually report your 2019 income, you are going to have to be verified by the financial aid office. And that usually means you've got to contact the IRS and request a tax transcript, which just is going to add another step to your process. If you do use this tool, you will be taken directly into the Internal Revenue website, where you will use your 2019 income tax return to report your income. Make sure you are using the information on your return and putting it in these fields exactly as it's reported. Even if you've moved since you filed the return, or say your name was misspelled on the return, we've seen that several times. This is why it's important to have your return in front of you. And then you're almost finished with your FAFSA. But before you submit, please review your student aid report. This report is going to show every question that you were asked and your answer to that question. Now, if you see that there's an error, you can always go back into the FAFSA before you've submitted it, correct it, and then move on to the Sign and Submit page. You want to make sure that your financial aid office has the most accurate information so you can receive your financial aid as soon as possible. Now, this is where your FSA IDs are going to come into play. The student and one of his parents is going to be asked to use that ID to sign your FAFSA. And once you do, you'll see the FAFSA confirmation page pop up. This is the only time you're going to get this much detailed information. So please print it or take a screenshot of it. This will tell you the next steps that you need to take to complete the financial aid process. It will show the list of colleges that will receive your FAFSA data, show your expected family contribution, and your financial aid estimates. And everybody gets excited when they see these dollar amounts. But remember that these are just estimates based on your manual answers in the FAFSA. The financial aid office is going to verify all of your information before they contact you with a financial aid offer. If your family situation has changed since 2019, you are going to want to contact the financial aid office directly. Say that your parents have had a layoff, someone has lost a job, you've had some unexpected medical expenses. The financial aid office will take all of this into consideration, but it's your responsibility to let them know about it. They are going to determine your net price by taking their cost of attendance on their campus and subtracting any grants or scholarships that you're eligible for and letting you know what your net price is. And you are responsible for paying that net price, whether it's out of pocket or by using and accepting your student loans. Now, this is an example of what a financial aid offer might look like. They're not all uniform, and every college is going to have its own format. But basically, all of this information should be reflected on the award letter. And that will include any grants and scholarships, if you've been offered any work study, and then any student loans to help you pay the balance. Remember that you're going to receive a financial aid offer from each school that you've listed on your FAFSA. And it's important to note that some colleges will wait until you finish the admissions process before they begin to calculate your financial aid. So make sure you're getting your college admissions requirements out of the way too. You'll want to accept your offer in this order. First, your scholarships and grants, because that is gift aid that does not have to be repaid. Then federal work study, which you've earned and don't have to pay back. And then last is your federal loan offer. You want to only accept what you need. You don't have to accept the entire loan amount that the college financial aid office might offer you, because this has to be repaid and with interest. The student financial aid process is explained in detail in Leela's FAFSA completion guide for the class of 2021, and it's free for all Louisiana high school seniors. So ask your counselor for your electronic copy or send me an email and I'll be happy to send that on to you. And I'll also include Leela's senior checklist to help you stay on track this year. Now, one of the most important conversations we'll have this evening are about scholarships. You know that there are thousands of them and they're offered by schools and your parents' employers, professional and social organizations. Some of them are merit-based, some of them are based on financial need. But the bottom line is, by applying for these scholarships, you are going to hopefully reduce the cost of your education and reduce the amount of student loans that you might have to borrow. So talk to your counselor about scholarship opportunities and contact the financial aid offices and admissions offices about scholarships that they know of. This year, Leela is offering 2 scholarship opportunities. So just by completing your FAFSA and contacting us at leela.org, you can enter our $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship. If you have an older sibling who's already in college, tell them about Leela's $1,000 Choose Louisiana Scholarship. And you can find the details for both of these at leela.org. And also you'll find the scholarship application there as well. Leela has a nonprofit education loan program. If you find that you are going to a pricier college and you need some additional lower interest rate loans, check that out at leelachoice.org. And now it's time for your questions, and hopefully I'll have the answers to them. But if you do have a question that I can't answer, don't worry, I'm going to find out that answer for you. I'll go ahead and put up our FAFSA helpline information and my personal email address here if you want to contact me individually. And I'm going to check the chat box. really quickly. Okay, here's someone who says, I have a FAFSA account because I just graduated as a psychologist a year ago, and I have to pay for my student loan. Oh, this is about her mom. And I have to pay for mom's student loan. I have to create a new ID and information for my daughter. Mom, in this situation, you will use your FSA ID for your federal student aid needs and also for your daughter's. So you'll use your FSA ID to check your loan balances and also to sign your daughter's FAFSA. Let's see if we have any more. And Mom, if you want to talk to me individually about that, just give me a call. And that is the only chat I have at this point. Does anybody else have a question? If you're very welcome. If anybody wants to speak to me, please give me a call, talk to your counselor. She's a great resource, and I want to thank you all for having me this evening. And I look forward to receiving your FAFSA scholarship applications. Have a great senior year.